Everybody, this is Dream, and today, for Friday, we actually have an earlier slate. That's why I'm doing it tonight. So we got Iona and Seattle, and then Bucknell and Rutgers. Both these games look like they're not going to be very close. I have Iona over Seattle by about 8 points, and I have Rutgers over Bucknell by 18 points. So keep that in mind. The Seattle-Iona game is also projected to score about 15 real points more than the Rutgers-Bucknell game, so keep that in mind as well. And obviously, Iona is probably one of the highest scoring team here, and they usually also play pretty good defense. So, with that said, let's get into the players we do like today. We're going to start off with Iona. We're just going to go through the four teams here, basically. And we're going to start with Denias Jenkins for Iona here. He's averaging 30 fantasy points per game. He has only had 2 games under 22 fantasy points all season long, and only 1 game under 10 fantasy that was under 10 fantasy points. And this is a pretty good matchup for Iona, so I suspect him to come out and play well in this game. I don't have any reason to doubt that he won't shoot quite a few shots and have a lot of opportunities to score points in this matchup. Then we're going to look at Walter Clayton here for Iona. He's also averaging around 30 fantasy points a game. He's only had 1 game under 21 fantasy points, and he's had double figures in all games except for the first 2, where he had 9 points each. And then he had some other situation where he had 5 games over 20 20 real points rather, and out of 11 games. So he's been extremely good. He also averages 1.1 fantasy points per minute. He's one of my favorite plays on the slate, at least especially at the guard position. Then we're going to continue to look at Iona at forwards, and we're going to start with Quinn Selinsky here. Now, he has been underpriced for what he's been doing. He's been hurt for most of the season, but he's back as a starter, and so his price point makes him really viable here. He is only averaging 0.87 fantasy points per minute, but I do think he's viable here because he can get rebounds. And like I said, he hadn't played very many games, and now that he's back, I suspect that this is going to be a type of game that he's going to be able to dominate in. But then also we're going to look at Nelly Jr. Joseph here for Iona as well. Now, he has been absolutely dominant this season. He's averaging 1.07 fantasy points per game. He's been good all year. He's averaging 33 fantasy points a game almost, and has some really big-time upside. He's had some really big games where he's been in the more 40s and 50s. So I suspect that he can do a big game like that, where especially if he can get a double-double, he'll definitely get the points, and he usually gets decently close on rebounds. So I think he's got a great opportunity here in this matchup. So that's who I have for Iona. Then we're going to look at Seattle. I actually didn't find much to like here on Seattle. If I had to pick anybody, it would be Chatfield for Seattle here, but they are projected to do very well in this game, and Iona is probably the toughest defensive team. Even though Seattle is a little bit better than Bucknell, I really had trouble finding much that I liked on Seattle beyond Chatfield. So then we're going to go ahead and look at Rutgers here, and we're going to start with Cam Spencer. For Rutgers, he's averaging 27 fantasy points a game. He's had 2 bad games this season, and his minutes are a little bit in flux, but he's been generally pretty good this year, and I suspect that he's going to have a good game in this one. Rutgers should dominate Bucknell in this game. Then we're going to look at Paul Mulcahy. Sorry about that. He's averaging 7.79 fantasy points per game. Not quite as good as Cam Spencer at 8.6, but he's missed a few games this season, and he's back to the starter and playing big minutes. He hasn't played a ton of games this season, but now that he's back starting, he's going to have a good opportunity here. I think he's probably a better play on the slate than Cam Spencer is, but they're both viable here. And then we're going to look at Caleb McConnell for Rutgers as well. He's averaging 23 fantasy points a game. And he's been starting and playing really well the last 5 games. He's had 3 games over 30 fantasy points in the last 5 and 2 under 20. So he is a little bit boom or bust, but his price point makes him viable. And Rutgers has three really good guards there. They're all starting and have good opportunities. Then we're going to look at for Rutgers, Cliff Omari. So he's the most expensive guy on Rutgers. Now he's been really good all season long, and I do kind of slightly like him more than Nelly Jr. Joseph, even though Nelly Jr. Joseph for Iona has a little bit better upside. Cliff Omari, sorry, he has no games under 20 fantasy points on the season, and this should continue in this game. He's had some really monster games too, and this is a nice plus matchup for him. I suspect he's going to have plenty of opportunity, hopefully get a double-double in this game as well, which would really boost him. He's had 8 or 9 rebounds in nearly all the games this season at minimum. He's had 2 games under 9 or under 8, excuse me. So really solid opportunity here to have a dominant performance. And he's also leading the game, the slate with a 1.11 fantasy points per minute. And his price point is not that terrible considering his output. So that's one guy. And then I'm going to also talk about Hyatt for them. Now, he is a bit riskier. He's only $6,000. But he's been in between 15 and 26 fantasy points in every game this season. And he had one game over 30 fantasy points, was the one exception. Though he only averages 0.76 fantasy points per minute, he's still very viable on the slate, and I think he's a great play overall in general. So I do think he's a really good option. So there we go. Then I have a couple guys else to mention here for Bucknell. Even though Bucknell is the weakest when it comes to expected actual points, they have 2 players that I think are viable on the slate. I'm going to start with Andre Screen, excuse me. He's been very inconsistent this season, but he's had some really big games, so that gives him some viability. And I do expect him to do okay in this game. I don't expect him to have a big game, but I do think he's going to be good enough to pay off for the roster. He averages 1.02 fantasy points per game, and he's only $5,600, which is definitely nice on the slate where there's not a ton of sub $6,000 options available. But I do have one other guy to mention, and that is Jack Forrest. He is criminally underpriced. Well, not really criminally, but he's playing 20 minutes a game. He's played the last 2 games. He's coming back from injury. He missed the first 10 games of the year. So his price hasn't really come up. And I suspect he's going to get more opportunity in this game, especially with this probably going to be lopsided game. But he's one of the few guys on the team that looks like that they have some opportunity to have some upside at their price. Being at $3,500 in his 2 games so far this season, he's got 10 and 13 fantasy points. And for that price point, we could do a lot worse. So I think he's viable here. I think he's a salary saver that helps you pay up for some other guys. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing, and have a nice day, guys.